Welcome to the channel for the first time viewers. Welcome back for my existing subscribers. Today's going to be a little bit of a more relaxed video. I'm going to talk about my entire GPU journey, starting from the pre-built that I got and all the way to today. So for those of you that have been following the channel since I was making Rainbow Six Siege content and I first, making content on PS4 and Xbox One and Xbox, I think it was One X and One S even. I first got my PC in 2018. It was about January. The very first PC I got was a CyberPower PC. It came with RX 580 and a Ryzen 5 1400 and one 8GB stick of RAM, which was at 3000. I think it was 3000 megahertz. It wasn't good. It was A data. But anyways, that was the very first PC I had. No SSDs, nothing. So from there, it was later on that year, around April, I went out, and by that time, the GTX 1080 was the not the flagship because the 1080 Ti had come out, but it was one of the main cars that most people wanted. So it was sold out a lot of times. You go to Best Buy, and 1070 was regularly available. And mind you, the RX 580 that I had was a 4GB, so it wasn't even the good one, right? A lot of the pre-builds at the time were coming with the 3GB 1060, which you hear a lot of channels, talking about how much that card underperforms and how much it's really fallen to irrelevancy, whereas the 6GB card is still relevant today. So that was my first build, first PC experience for Rainbow Six Siege. It was amazing. I was getting I think I had a 4K 60 hertz monitor that I had then changed it for a 1080p 144 hertz. I didn't know the difference. So I just went out, I saw a monitor, and I was like, I mean, it's 4K, whatever, let me get that. So I got that, and again, it was a Dell, just regular monitor, man. But I was actually able to get like 70 FPS, which is really good if you use all the lowest settings. Now, again, around April, the GTX 1080 finally became available. So Battlefield 5 was it BF5? BF5 was in beta. So I went out and got the GTX 1080 because I wanted to play Battlefield 5. I could not play the BF1 DLC because I only had 8 gigs of RAM. I didn't know that that's why I couldn't play, but at the time, anytime I tried to launch it, it just wouldn't work, right? So with that said, I ended up going and getting the GTX 1080. I kept the Ryzen 5 1400, and I was getting about 45 FPS. So that's not really like a playable experience. So what I did from there was I took the Ryzen 5 1400, I sold it. I think I got like $100 for it, and I spent 150 to get the Ryzen 5 1600. And that was the first experience I had where I understood that, okay, it was like a $50 difference for the CPU. How much of a performance difference could it really be? But that was a 4-core 8-thread chip versus a 6-core 12-thread chip. And that was initially that was a game changer because I was able to play the Battlefield 5 beta at like 90 FPS with the and it was like 90 on Ultra with the GTX 1080. And so that was first upgrade. Scary as hell. I sold the RTX or the RX 580, and that's what helped me get the 1080. And it was only like $599 or something like that. So completely different from what they cost today. But again, that was my first big upgrade. So that was again the very first upgrade. The next upgrade I got was a complete revamping of that build. I kept the same case, but I went with the GT or the RTX 2080 at the time. And with the 2080, I had finally also upgraded to the i9 9700K. So that was my first Intel chip. I didn't really care about getting the RTX for ray tracing or anything like that. I just got a decent sale price on my GTX 1080. So I was like, all right, well, whatever. I actually talked to the guy on Facebook. He was trying to build a SLI type of, because SLI was like when you have two graphics cards to either play the same game. Like not too many games support it today, but at the time SLI was still popular, and he was trying to go for like high scores and things like that. And he already had a Founders Edition 1080. So I went and got the RTX or the GTX. Damn it, there's so many acronyms. The RTX 2080, and that was the Founders Edition as well. But I also upgraded the CPU. That's also when I started doing benchmarks. I did like 2 benchmarks with the Ryzen 5, 2 or 3. It wasn't that many. With the Ryzen 5 1600 and the GTX 1080. I just couldn't find any performance benchmarks about that combination at the time, right? And also there weren't that many benchmark channels. So I was like, all right, let me just put my video out there. I did Assassin's Creed. I think I did Far Cry. At the time it was like Far Cry New Dawn or Far Cry 5. And like a couple other things like Metro Exodus, and that was kind of it. So on to the RTX 2080, things were clicking. I was having a great time. That's about the time where I started working on my second build. A lot of y'all that are, watching the channel now, you're seeing that I have a 7950X 3D and 13900K, but it didn't really start off like that, right? So again, I had the Ryzen 5 1400, and I had the i9 9700K as my 2 starting points for just being introduced into either Ryzen or Intel, right? So I started working on my second PC around that summer, and that's also when I had gotten a Ryzen 5 3600. The reason I got that one is because it was touted as being an 8700K killer. So those of you that have been following, Intel had a really, really good 6-core CPU. And this performed about the same when it came to editing and when it came to gameplay. So I went and got that. I was like, all right, cool. I'm good. I got, 16 gigs of RAM. And I think it was like 3200 C16. It wasn't fantastic, by the way. I didn't know about BDI. I didn't know about tuning. I didn't know about anything. I just knew that XMP and turn on the basic stuff like that. So with that, I went ahead, built the second PC. The first GPU I got for it was the 5600 XT. And that was like $250 or $300. It was somewhere in that ballpark, but it wasn't bad. I was like, okay, this is straight. This is not bad. My second AMD GPU now, but the Radeon Relive still had issues. GTA 5 wasn't really functioning too well. It was really warm. It would get to about 85C whenever I played Madden. If you go really far back, I think if you just go into the benchmark playlist and switch it to chronological order, you'll start to see some of those benchmarks. But I was playing Warzone 1 with that. Decent performance at 1440p though. I will say it was at like 100 FPS, 120 FPS, which isn't bad. So I exchanged that one for a 5700 XT. I got a list over here on my left. I exchanged that one for the 5700 XT. And what I did with that one is I was floored by that one. It was a super, super basic model, XFX, thick, I think it was. Whatever they had at Best Buy. And it wasn't like phenomenal by any means as far as temps. It was another one that got really toasty. But with both of those AMD cards, I used to get black screens, and the recording software wasn't the best, right? So Relive was still cutting its teeth. It was still okay. It got the job done, but it wasn't like reliable, right? Whereas on the, at this point, my second build had that 9700K and 2080 just sitting there whole time, stable, doing content creation, doing everything on that. And I had this second build, and it was really a hot mess too. Anytime I wanted to switch, I would, because before I bought the AMD GPUs, the second ones, like the 5600 and XT and the 5700 XT, what I had to do was take the RTX 2080 out of the Intel build, slap it into the AMD build, and then I had a GPU to play with, right? So that's how I used to like test the systems, like take it all apart, remove a GPU, stick it into the other one. So from the 5700 XT, I was like, okay, this is getting too hot, not too comfortable with it, still getting black screens. Let me try out another, NVIDIA card in the same price range. And that's when I bought the 2060 Super, right? So at this time it had already gotten a refresh. And I was like, I already got a 2080. 2080 Super was a little bit faster. Didn't really make much sense. 2070 Super was the same performance almost with like 5 FPS difference. So let me go get something that's going to make a little bit more sense. We get the 2060 Super. Did some. It was, when games like Call of Duty, it was a little bit slower sometimes than the 5700 XT. But when you play games like, you know, Borderlands and other things where you try to turn on the original old school ray tracing, that made a bigger difference. And after that, you know, I sold that card and I decided to give the 5700 XT another try, which is when I bought the Sapphire Pulse. No, it wasn't the Pulse, the Nitro. So it was the best. I went from 2 budget AMD GPUs to let me try something really good. Through that time, I also had upgraded to the 3800X. So I switched to the 3800X on the AMD build. And on the Intel build, the 10900K had just come out. So I went ahead and switched to the 10900K on my second PC. And again, I was like, okay, let me try a premium card, which the temperatures were night and day. I think the hottest that card got to was like 73, whereas like the XFX was like 85, 87. Same case, same scenario, same everything. It was a Corsair 4000D airflow. It just was it had a way better cooler, right? So it just kept the card better cooled. So a lot less black screening, a much better experience. And the only reason I had returned that 5700 XT is because in the interim, the RTX 3000 series got announced, right? And mind you, this is normally how, because my channel's pretty small. My channel's like, this is not this big wig channel. I don't have unlimited funds. So I have to sell some of my old stuff to get my new stuff. So the 3000 series got announced and everybody was panic selling their 2080 Ti's, their 20 series. So during that time, again, I upgraded both my CPUs. I had the 3800X on one, the 10900K on another. And I was able to go ahead and upgrade to the 2080 Ti on my 2080 build. So that was cool because when I did the upgrade, it was literally a trade and $150. So I went from a 2080 Founders Edition to a Strix, a 1.5 month old Strix, which I still can't believe that. Like when I think about that, that was such a crazy deal for me. It was a horrible deal for him. But he was like, hey, the new cards are coming out and I never really used this one. So I'll trade. And the way I got to that, I emailed like literally everybody that had a 2080 Ti on Marketplace, and one person said yes. So yeah, that's how I got from the 2080 to the 2080 Ti. Benchmarks are also on the channel for that. And I got an opportunity to buy the 3080. So I had a 2080 Ti in one build and a 3080 in the other build. So I sold or returned the 5700 XT. Right. So I was like, all right, well, it's almost the same money, but the performance was significantly different. So I was like, why? Like I paid like $550, I think it was. So it's like, if I'm paying $550 and this is $699, well, like the performance is just through the roof. Like I'm gonna switch it out. And then I did make a video later on because I sold my 2080 Ti and I bought a 6900 XT. It was the first, because that 3080 that I bought, I actually purchased it scalped on Marketplace for what ended up being the new retail price later. So when I got it, it was I think 1100 and I talked them down to like 1070 or 1050. And in like 6 months, if you were able to even buy an MSI card retail, it was Gaming X Trio, it was like 1150, 1180. So I ended up getting a better deal from a scalper early on than having to wait and buy it retail from Newegg. Just because supply and demand was out of control. And again, during that time, I had a 3800X and I had a 10900K. So I actually skipped the 11th gen Intel, just didn't worry about it altogether. I didn't really see an advantage to going down in cores, even though they were faster. And Warzone wasn't significantly faster. So I was like, it's just a waste of time. So yeah, they got a 6900 XT, brand new, through Newegg, and it was super expensive. It was like $1,400, but that was the retail price of graphics cards in 2020 and 2020, actually 2021, and the earliest half of 2022. They were just really expensive because scalpers were buying them. Everyone was buying them. Miners, gamers, scalpers, creators. So everybody was buying these graphics cards, which drove the price just through the roof. since that was never my top choice for 3090s, you know, as soon as the Asus, no, not the Asus, the EVGA For the Win 3 came out, I went ahead and I picked that one up. And it was a different bundle through Ant Online. So I actually kept the XR1 Pro, the capture card that came with it, and I got rid of the power supply. I got rid of everything else. So, and I flipped my old GPU, the Asus Tough, because it's at the height of crypto. So I flipped it on eBay for essentially what I paid for it. So it wasn't that bad. And it was like 22 is what I sold it for. I sold it for 22. So out of everything, when it's said and done, it came out to like 20 or 1900, like 1985 or something like that. So it was more or less a wash to go into the actual model that I wanted. The only issue with that model is that all the memory is kind of split, right? So some of it is actively being cooled by the fan, and some of it is passively being cooled. So with that said, you had a lot of issues where the overclocks that you would try to throw on there would be thermal throttle because the memory would hit 84C in like 10 seconds flat. So that was the max that you could overclock your memory to. Not your memory to, but your the max temperature your memory would allow on that specific card. So when the 3090 Ti came out, that was the solution to the problem because all the memory chips were on the same side as the actual cooler, so they were being actively cooled. There were some workarounds, like you could water cool your card, or you could, at the time, I've never water cooled a card, by the way, but you could water cool your card, or you could put a fan on the back, and that would help out a little bit. But I wasn't really into that, so I never explored that. So the 3090 Ti for me was the fix. So I went with the 3090 Ti, sold that one to a developer. The cool thing about it is that I think I sold my 3090 for like $1,000. I think it was like $1,000, and it was like $11.99 to get the 3090 Ti because the 3090 Ti was supposed to be $2,000, but crypto was on the downward trend, so no one was really pumping crypto anymore, and nobody was really doing anything as far as like trying to scout because there wasn't that much money to make, so they were actually available. And that's why it was kind of funny, like debating between like 4080s and 3090 Ti's because the performance was so close, and then the 4080 12 gig was just. It's really what the 4070 Ti came out to, and a lot of times the 3090 Ti was better. Probably the best graphics card I ever had, as far as just overall, right? The 4090 is the best performing card I have, but as far as like just newness and I don't know, it was just a dope card. It was a dope card. So later on that year, around August, and by the way, I had already upgraded to the 5900X at this time. So like. When I got the first Tough, the 3090, I also, around that time frame, had gotten a 5900X, so I upgraded my CPU. And the 12900K came out, so I upgraded my Intel build to a 12900K. So now everything's pretty much up to date, and the 6950 XT comes out, so I flipped my 6900 XT. AMD cards have been, as far as the resale value, the absolute worst. Right, so it's kind of like trying to sell an Android phone. You can sell your iPhone. It's not going to be retail price. It's not going to be what you pay for your next iPhone, but it'll be a couple hundred less than what you paid for your phone when you got it. Whereas like the Android phones, if you paid like $1,000 for it, you'll be lucky to get like 5, right? So like half, and that's like the top, like the Notes, the Galaxy Notes, right? If you have an obscure Android phone that you paid for, God bless, because yeah, they don't hold their value like that. So yeah. That's how I look at the AMD cards. Just get it because you want it, and just know that you're not going to get top dollar when you go to resell it. So yeah, I got the 6950 XT, sold my 6900, and then later this year, the same year, now we're in 2022, and I've already gone through, I don't know, like 13 GPUs. This is when the RTX 4000 launched, and that is the only reason why I sold my 6950 XT. That was the best AMD experience I ever had. Never had black screening. The drivers were mature by then, but never had black screening. Very rarely had game crashes. And every now and then certain games would stutter, but that was an AMD problem. It wasn't necessarily the card itself. So that was the first time I was like, yo, this is like across the board, stellar. It was the Red Devil. So from there, I sold the Red Devil only because I was getting a 4090. So I got the 4090, and at this point, I had the 4090, the 3090 Ti, and then I picked up a 4080 the next month. So it was out for about a month, and I picked that up, and that was the 3 cards I had. I had a buddy that needed a card, so I sold that card to him for a little less than what I paid for it, but less than market value. So that was kind of how I got not rid of the 3090 Ti, but that's where the 3090 Ti went. Has a new home. It's gonna get used full time. So at this point, took that and I bought an entire second build. This was the budget box. So if y'all remember, I had a PC for a little bit called the budget box, and it was a 12700F, a RTX 3060, and like 16 gigs. It was super basic. Whole thing was $700. So that funded the budget box. Did a couple of videos in that series, upgraded that to a 13700K. Upgraded my main build by this time to a 13900K. And essentially from that point, we just had a couple of GPUs here and there, right? So I've been pretty steady at this rate. So 4090, then I got the 4080, and then believe it or not, the 3060, because it came with the budget box, and that's what I called it. So 3060, and then I upgraded it, which was insane. Before the 4070 Ti or any of that came out, I got a brand new inbox 3070 Ti for $400. It was somebody that was going to mine, and the mining market fell apart. It was actually a auto parts store. It was the craziest card purchase. You go there and it's like this is bizarre, because I'm at a mechanic shop and dude has graphics cards for sale, and his assistant, who knows nothing about graphics cards, is just looking up online values and saying like, well, I could undercut this and get my owner some cards. So they ended up getting that card to me, and I got the it was a Ventus. It was a Ventus, and it was again $400. That was a steal. So that was the 3070 Ti. Had that for a little bit, but when I got rid of the budget box, I sold that along with it. And this was when I got my first XTX. So I got my 7900 XTX after I sold my 4080, which was a mistake. I should have held on to that. It was a Gaming X Trio, great card, 0 issues. Decent overclocker. It wasn't like impressive, but it was okay, right? So I sold that one to get the 7900 XTX. I should have waited, because the first two, I got an XFX, I got another XFX, and they were both trash. They would crash all the time. User error it was partially my fault, partially drivers. But with my entire channel, everything I do as far as the content, the gameplay, it's all done from the same PC. So if I'm recording on the same PC. If I'm gaming or streaming, I don't do dual PC setups. So when the recording software does not work properly, for me, that's a big deal. It's like if you were a video editor, right? Which is one issue I had on the 6950 XT. If you're a video editor and your editing program was inverting the colors and you could not fix it, right? That's a problem. Like, you can't work, right? And this doesn't necessarily work, but I couldn't record videos. Like it just didn't work. It was like doing like inconsistent frame rates. And in games that's okay, but in a video recording it's not okay. So I was getting like 47 FPS, 52 FPS, and the problem with that is that it just chops. Like it's stuttery, and you can't use the content. And there's nothing you can do, because the content, for whatever reason, the encoder was, I don't even know. It would record at those broken FPS numbers. And so I returned both of those to Amazon, and I ended up getting a Sapphire Nitro, which essentially fixed a lot of the issues that I was having. I do regret returning that one, because the only thing I didn't try is because I came from a 4090, which is a higher power limit card. And for whatever reason, my brain didn't think to put, okay, you're using pigtails, right? So I had 2 PCIe cables, and the third one was just a pigtail, which I think was leading to a lot of the black screening. It didn't cause any of the driver issues. That was just the card being the card, right? Like that's just the AMD cards having terrible drivers. Around February-ish, they fixed that though. So this is like February 2023. All right, so fast forward to, we're in February 2023. I returned both those cards. I picked up a 4080 for like 15 minutes. And then I decided, just to return that. Because at this point I returned, actually, let me backtrack a little bit. I returned the 7900 XTX, and this is the strangest thing, but this is why I have two 4090s. It's because I was like, let me just get another 4090 for my other build, because I didn't really see, like, going back to a 4080, I sold mine to get this, 7900 XTX. It didn't work out. So I was like, I don't really see going back to another 4080. So let me just get another 4090. So I got the Ventus at that point. And not the Ventus, the Supreme X. So long story short, the last card that I ended up getting was I re-got another XTX, which is the Tai Chi. I fixed the errors of my ways, which was the pigtails. New drivers have come out that have been a lot more stable, so that kind of fixed itself. And just recently, like 2-3 weeks ago, went through that Gigabyte purchasing. So first ever Gigabyte products. The video's on the channel. The first ever Gigabyte products, went with the, what was it? The Gaming OC. Gaming OC? I'm having a blank. It wasn't the Aorus, it was the Aorus Elite and the Aorus Master. So I made a video about the three, and essentially each time you went up, got a better memory overclock and like 15 megahertz on the core. So the Aorus Master was essentially the best of the three, because it pushed 3 gigahertz pretty easily, no issues across games. Then I ended up swapping the Aorus Master for a Strix. So this was the first Strix card that I ever got. And the first Strix was an abomination. This is still 4070 Ti. So the first Strix was an abomination. Anything over stock. So if I did 25 megahertz over stock on the core, crash. Nothing but crash. Within 15 minutes, crash. So I thought maybe I connected it wrong, did DDU, did all that stuff. The card was just, you had to run that card stock. So I was like, this ain't normal, right? And it's not even like it was boosting high. I'm talking about like 2890 megahertz on the memory, crash, right? Anything, 2890 is nothing. Now I'm getting 3 gigahertz easy. So I took that Strix, took it back to Best Buy. I got another Strix card, which kind of sucks because the first one was in mint condition. They were both new. The second one's box looked like it went through World War III. And I was like, well, it's usually just the box. Let me just, whatever, right? It's just a box. But the actual unit had a small little scuff on the metal housing. And it looked like somebody probably hit the box really hard. But the card itself fully functions, and I'm just going to rock with it. So it's something I know is there, but if I were to just hand the card to you, you probably wouldn't see it. So it's not a big deal. And the function, like this is the best 4070 Ti I've had. So this one overclocks to 12 gigahertz on the memory. So it's or 12,000 megahertz on the memory. So it's $14.99, and I could probably do more, but I just don't want to push it too far. And it does 140 on the core. So if I'm playing a game like Hogwarts or something like that, it's at 3015 megahertz, which is really good, right? Temperatures are amazing. Everything's fantastic. And that is currently, where we're at. And throughout this time, I had also picked up a 7950X 3D, which y'all know. At this point, this part of the video is where most of y'all may know the channel from. So this is just par for the course. It's just most of the recent benchmarks I've done since I'd say like May. That's when I got the 7950X 3D, was around May. Has been on that test build that I did. So yeah, that's been the journey, man. Let's run through it. RTX 580 to the GTX 1060 to the RTX 2080 to the steal of a deal to the 2080 Ti later on. But in between, I got the 5600 XT, the 5700 XT, the 2060 Super. And then I went back to the 5700 XT with the top end model, which I then later sold for to be able to get a 3080. So that's the only reason why I don't have that one anymore. 6900 XT after that. That was the first new card I was able to get from last gen. 3090 Ti. Later that summer, we got the 6950 XT. Then RTX 4000 comes out, so we get the 4090. Then we got the 4080 like a month or so later, which was everything was good there. 3060 came with a pre-built that we then upgraded to a 3070 Ti and sold the 3060 for like half of what the upgrade was. A little over half. I think it was like $300 is what I sold it for. So get a 3070 Ti for $400, brand new in the box. Sell the 3060 for $300 at the time. Then 7900 XT Expos. I made a whole video about that after getting the third one. So I had the two XFX Mercs. Returned both of those and ended up with the Sapphire Nitro, which is probably the second best card I ever had. Actual physical card in your hand, looking in your build. That thing was saucy. But yeah, after that, got a another XTX, which was the Tai Chi, and that's what I have today. And the 4070 Ti slew of cards that we went through, which was the Gigabyte Gaming, Aorus Master, Aorus Elite, and then finally the Strix. So right now the cards I have are the Asus TUF 4090 because it has a 600 watt limit. Then I have the MSI Supreme X 4090. I got the Strix 4070 Ti, and then I have the ASRock Tai Chi 7900 XTX. So I don't know. This video is probably gonna be like 30 something minutes long, but yeah. Hopefully y'all enjoyed it. This has been my entire GPU journey. What I could think of next would be like a 5090. I have to slow down on the cards I get. So now I'm going to try to rely on, just, I don't necessarily do PC optimization, but every now and then somebody will reach out to me and then, just to say, bless me for my time, right? So that'll be essentially what we do there. But I do parts list. So sometimes folks will be like, hey, help me buy a PC, and be like $50. We'll look at pre-builds, or I'll throw you a list of parts that you could buy that I've already, vetted and that I've used. And we'll kind of go from there. So that's another thing I'll do along with AdSense. So with AdSense, I'll go ahead and, stack that until the next parts come out, whether it's a new CPU or a new GPU, to kind of cut down on expenses. Hopefully the channel keeps growing. This month was really good. I got like 70 subscribers this month, so that was actually pretty awesome. Also crossed over 4K. But hopefully the channel keeps growing, and yeah, I could just keep doing this on a consistent basis. And this could be something where new car comes out within a week or two. I can get y'all full reviews and just expand on the content a little bit, but that's super expensive, right? And even to buy it and return it, even that's something I'm not trying to do, because I do want to start building up not a repository of cards, right? So if I want to go test something or see how performance has improved or regressed over the course of driver updates and things like that, I want to start trying to keep more of my, at least the GPUs. The CPUs, I really can't see myself holding on to them, because then you need a board, and it isn't just a DDU clean install. Like, you gotta move the AIOs, and it's just too much work to keep CPUs and stuff like that. So GPUs for sure, and we'll see what happens. Probably have to weigh the next upgrades a little bit more carefully. Things have changed as far as work goes. So that's what I'm talking about there. All right, I will catch y'all on the flip. If you made it to the end, you are the real MVP. So just write MVP in the comment section. I know you made it to the end. That's pretty wild. All right, catch y'all on the flip. Be easy.